Thidwick the Big-Hearted Moose. Up at Lake Winnebago, the far northern shore, lives a huge herd of moose, about 60 or more. And they all go around in a big happy bunch, looking for nice tender moose moss to munch. For the moose moss that day was especially fine, when it happened that Thidwick, the last moose in line, saw a bingle bug sitting. The bug called out, "Hey, it's such a long road and it's such a hot day. Would you mind if I rode on your horns for a way?" "Of course not," smiled Thidwick, the big-hearted moose. "I'm happy my antlers can be of some use." So the bingle bug picked out a nice, easy seat, and the moose went on looking for moose moss to eat. An hour or so later, the bug heard a squeak, and he heard the small voice of a tree spider speak. "I say," said the spider, "you've got a fine place. That moose seems quite friendly, has such a nice face. If I got on too, do you think he would mind?" "Hop aboard," laughed the bug, "and I think that you'll find that the moose won't object. He's the big-hearted kind." And the very next thing the poor animal knew, a bobcat and turtle were living there too. What was the big-hearted moose going to do? A host has to put up with all kinds of pests, for a host above all must be nice to his guests. They asked in a fox, who jumped in from the trees. They asked in some mice, and they asked in some fleas. They asked a big bear in, and then, if you please, came a swarm of 362 bees. Poor Thidwick sank down with a groan to his knees, and then came something that made his heart freeze. Bullets came zigging right past Thidwick's face. Guns were bang-binging all over the place. Thidwick took to his heels with that load on his head. With 500 pounds on his horns, the moose fled. He could have run faster without all those pests, but a host, above all, must be nice to his guests. Up canyon, off cliff, over wild rocky trail, with bullets bouncing all around him like hail. Then finally they had him. He gasped. He felt faint, and the whole world grew fuzzy. Thidwick was finished completely. Or was he? Finished? Not Thidwick. Decidedly not. It's true he was in a most terrible spot, but now he remembered a thing he'd forgot. A wonderful something that happens each year to the horns of all moose and the horns of all deer. Today was the day Thidwick happened to know that old horns come off so that new ones can grow. His old horns today are where you knew they would be. His guests are still on them, all stuffed as they should be.
Welcome to 12 Stone in week 5 of Parenting Through Proverbs. From King Solomon to, well, Dr. Seuss. And today, Thidwick, the big-hearted moose. Well, in parenting, one of the great tensions is what happens in that parent-child relationship when they graduate from high school, when they pass 18, when they move into adulthood. Because they're no longer kids, they're no longer teens, they're growing up. And what does that relationship look like? What should it look like? Well, there are all sorts of extremes, like the extreme I grew up with. When I was 12 years old, roughly, my parents divorced. By the time I hit 18, my dad was pretty much disconnected. It was obvious he wasn't going to help me, and he never did. Once I hit 18, that was it. We were done. Now, there's the other extreme. In the recent generation of this failure to launch is the way our culture describes it, with 20-somethings moving back into the home, so to speak. And some saying for economic reasons or because of the weight of college debt and economic instability in jobs. Others writing and saying, oh, it's really because that generation isn't choosing to take full emotional weight for their life, full financial responsibility for their life, and on and on. And so there's that entire extreme conversation. Equally could be another extreme, and that is where the parents just won't let go, where the parents are the enablers, where the parents continue to control, even once the kids get married, even once they're married in their 20s, or with kids, or married in their 30s. And that, by the way, is why there are those proverbial old school in-law stories, like the ones I'll share with you that kind of deserve a little bit of a drum, ba-doom, boom at the end of each one. I'll give you two or three of them. Here we go. Adam and Eve were the happiest and the luckiest couple in the world because neither of them had in-laws. There you go, ba-doom, boom. Here's another one. What is the difference between outlaws and in-laws? Outlaws are wanted. I know, dry. Here, I got one more, let's go. A man, his wife, and his mother-in-law went on vacation to the Holy Land. While they were there, the mother-in-law passed away. The undertaker told them, you can have her shipped home for $5,000. Or you can bury her here in the Holy Land for $150. The man thought about it and told them, well, I'll just have her shipped home. And the undertaker asked, why would you spend $5,000 to ship your mother-in-law home when it would be wonderful to have her buried in the Holy Land for only $150? The man replied, a man died here 2,000 years ago. He was buried here, and 3 days later, he rose from the dead. I just can't take that chance. Well, there you have it. The old mother-in-law, father-in-law, in-law jokes. Why? Because there is this resentment in the relationship, and all these extremes, and the question is, what should parenting look like? Anything at all? As you move into the more grown-up relationships. Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So let's go back to our overview. On the screen where we launched the series, you might remember, here's where we've been. We laid it out in ages. Ages 1 to 5, more discipline. Ages 6 to 11, more about training. Ages 12 to 18, more about coaching. Left off with that last week. Go see the teaching if you missed it. And now today, 18 and up, and we're suggesting that's about advising. Here's what I'm saying. As you look over that kind of summary, what I'm saying is, kids, by time you become an adult and grown up, I'm not your disciplinarian. That's no longer my role in your life. I'm not training you. We've been through that. We've done all we can. I'm not even coaching you. Where we're turning now is, I'd love to be chosen to be your friend, and I'd love to be an advisor. Now, you're going to have to choose me for those. If you're willing to receive advice, I would love to give you advice because I think once you graduate from high school, I can help you navigate into the early stages of relationships, career, adulthood. So, for my kids, with my kids, I made a deal. I'm going to read the deal for you so I can state a script and be crisp and clear about it. Here's the nature of the deal I make with them once they graduate high school and they're becoming their own person, their own adult. The deal is, if you go to college, you have to pick a career, not a hobby. College is not 4 more years of high school. It's 4 years of career prep. It's not a party, it's work. It's not first about your passion, it's first about your gifting. Because we're not spending real money unless there is a real career on the other side of this degree. So you have to work through college. If you agree to the deal, then I will continue to provide. I'll be more than generous to help you get through, but you carry the weight of those 4 years and after. And if you remain under my roof, then we have to agree on new rules. But if you want, complete life independence, then you need to be completely financially independent. You can't live in my antlers and act like you're on your own. That's the deal. Now, I don't know what deal you'll make parents with your kids or kids your parents made with you. I'm just telling you that's really our family deal. So far, the first 3 of our 4 kids have taken the deal. Joshua has been married for 5 years and got through his degree, and Julissa has been married for 3 years, got through her degree, and Jake, who's 21 years old, and he's through his 3rd year of college. He's got 1 more to go. All 3 of those took that deal. So we've lived through it a couple times. We're in the middle of it again. My 4th, Jaden, who's 12, he's hoping the deal changes by the time he gets there. He's figuring that I'll be so old by the time he graduates high school and college that he'll just take over and own everything. At least that's the family joke. So as a parent of grown-up kids, I'm really hoping that what happens is we develop an adult-to-adult relationship and that you would choose me for 2 things. I hope you choose me to be a friend and to be an advisor. That's what I'm working for. Now, it's your choice. You got to make the decision. But I will say this to them. When I'm talking about advisor, here's what I mean. Wise people seek advice. Be teachable. Wise people are teachable in a world of fools. I think that's what Solomon was teaching us. That's the core thought I want to transfer today, and I really want to pour it into the life of my grown-up children. Look in your teaching notes. Everybody grab their teaching notes across the campuses. This is your fill in the blank. We'll put it right on the screen. Let's look at it together. You fill in the blank. Solomon's advice. It's from Proverbs 12:15, by the way, message version. Fools are headstrong. Write it down. Fools are headstrong and do what they like. Wise people take advice. Let's leave it up there because I want everybody to say it with me loud and proud when we get to the fill in the blank. Fools are what, everybody? Headstrong. Do it again. Fools are headstrong and do what they like. Wise people take what, everybody? Advice. That's right. Wise people take advice. That's how I just rewrote it in my notes. Wise people take advice. As you move into the more independent years, hear me, particularly if you're in that stage. Parents know that this is coming, but all of us experienced it who moved through that transition. As you move to more independent years, out of high school, into college age, into your 20s, the temptation is to use your independence to do what you want instead of what's wise. See, what's at risk right there is that you become headstrong, willful, obstinate. It means that you refuse to embrace wisdom and advice for the smart thing, and you just do whatever you want. Solomon would call that being a fool. Because you're ignoring the wisdom of experience of those ahead of you who know. You're ignoring the wisdom of your Father in heaven. That's a good bit of why when Jesus came to earth and he taught us, he said it's not enough that you just hear these words. You gotta exercise wisdom, which means live this out. This isn't just kind of a phase that you practice for a season. This is a lifestyle. It's got to be transforming. That's why in Matthew chapter 7, he gave us wise words. Everybody across campuses, grab your Bibles. We're going to turn over to Matthew chapter 7. We're on page 972 in your worship center Bible. Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. If you're on a mobile device, you have a Bible of your own. Matthew 7, verse 24, page 972 in your worship center Bibles. Let's look at it together. Listen to how Jesus is laying out this fool-wise scenario. Verse 24, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like, there it is, a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall because it had its foundations on the rock. That's wise. Verse 26, but everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. The fool is headstrong, obstinate, willful, wants to do it their own way, which, by the way, in Jesus' words means the easy way, on sand. Without doing the hard work of getting into the rock and being stable. No, just do it easy, fast. Not any real serious price. Do it the more quick, fun way. But then when the storm comes, it crashes. The wise, they put all the foundation work in. They pay all the deep price. They build on something solid like God's wisdom, God's word. That is wise. They don't merely do what they want, they do the will of their Father in heaven. They, being wise, take good advice and apply it. And those are the ones who succeed. That's what Jesus is telling us. That's what Solomon is saying. And so let's tap back into Seuss. What do we learn from Thidwick, the big-hearted moose, which really kind of means the good-hearted moose. He was good-hearted, he was big-hearted. And so if you turn in your teaching notes, we're going to talk about this. Thidwick, I'll just call him the good-hearted moose because I like that better. And he can give us some good-hearted advice for grown-ups. And the first one is this. It'll be on the screen. It'll be in your notes. The fallacy of easy seat. The fallacy of easy, fill it in, S-E-A-T, seat. See, the temptation, let's go back to it. The temptation is to be headstrong. To so desire what you want that you become blind to the truth of the coin. You become blind to the truth of the coin. And yes, I did say coin, but let me show you what I mean by the truth of the coin. Here's just a coin. Every coin has how many sides? Go ahead and tell your neighbor right now. Just lean over. This isn't a trick question, okay? Every coin has how many sides? Tell your neighbor. Right, two. Has two sides to every coin. Every complete coin has two sides. We all kind of know that. Now, there's not just one side of the coin, and that is true to life. Wise people know that in life, there's always two sides. It means that there is the blessing. There's the blessing side of something, but there is no blessing without the other side, the burden. There is no reward without the price. There's no picnic without ants. There's no credit card purchase without credit card payments. There's no lasting romance without the other side selflessly serving. There's really no joy of babies, one side, without poopy diapers, the other side. There's really no fresh garden in life without fighting weeds. There's no life in God. There is no life in God that's awesome without death to yourself. And there is no freedom without responsibility. See, wise people know that that is the truth of life. And what makes someone a fool is when they choose to believe there's only one side of the coin. When they pretend that there's an easy seat that should turn to easy street, and there's no other side to the coin. That's what makes this story so interesting. That's why when you get into this story of Thidwick and the big-hearted moose that he was, you get a little bit into the early part of the story and you meet the Bingle bug. Let me read it, although you've heard it at the beginning. When it happened that Thidwick, the last moose in line, saw Bingle bug sitting, the bug called out, "Hey, it's such a long road, and it's such a hot day. Would you mind if I rode on your horns for a way?" And he allowed him to take an easy seat just for a while. We all know that he ended up living there. And the end of the story is, Thidwick's old horns today are where you knew they would be. His guests are still on them, all stuffed as they should be. It ended very badly for the Bingle bug and all the other riders looking for easy seat to become easy street. The idea that you can just have one side of the coin, that there's just easy street, and that there's no responsibility on there, and that you could just go. In fact, I could go through the list. Let me do it. The idea that there should be a blessing but no burden. The idea that there should be a payoff and no price. The idea that there should be a picnic but no ants. The idea that you can have a credit card purchase but there should be no payments. This wish that you could have a lasting romance without selflessly serving. That there's going to be a joy of babies and no poopy diapers. That you can have a fresh garden and you shouldn't have to fight weeds. That you can have life in God and not die to yourself. That you can have freedom but not have responsibility. See, that's how fools see life. That's what makes them a fool. So fools look at just one side and say, that's how life should be. And that's why they end up stuffed on the wall, as they should be. See, Jesus, that's I think what Jesus is saying when he talks about the fool does the easy thing. He builds on the sand, and at the end of the day, it all crashes in. See, the bingo bug has nobody to blame but himself. He's not a victim of the world, he's a victim of himself. Did it to himself. That's what Jesus is saying in the story. And since we all are at risk of this temptation, of when we get more independence, of exercising the freedom to do exactly what we want instead of what's wise. Listen, this is why I want to teach my kids as they become grown. Seek advice so you can see. Seek advice so you can see. I wrote it this way in my notes. The purpose of advice is to think things through so that you can see both sides of the coin. Did you get that? The purpose of having my kids seek out advice, I think what Solomon was saying is so that you can see both sides of the coin. Because if you can only see one side of the coin, you're not going to understand how to do life. So when my kids come for advice, if they choose to, I'm going to ask them great questions. I'm going to ask them more questions than I give them answers. Because I want to see, do you see both sides of the coin? What do you understand? What do you see? What are you going after? And if they don't see both sides, my goal is to help them see what they don't see. Even see what's hard to see and hard to accept. A second thing of good-hearted advice that I think we can draw from our little friend Thidwick is number 2, friendships need fences to flourish. Write it down. Friendships need fences to flourish. See, what I hope is that I hope my kids will choose me to be their friend. I hope that I'll get to be their grown-up friend. And I hope they will choose me to be able to give them advice. But I know this, even in family, let alone everywhere else in life, friendships need fences to flourish. Now, Thidwick is big-hearted. He's good-hearted. And that's a good thing. In fact, Scripture says in Proverbs chapter 11, check it out on the screen. This is really good advice. One man gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous man will prosper. He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. See, that right there is great advice. And I want my kids to know that advice. I want them to draw from that great advice. We should all embrace the advice. But some read the story about Thidwick and they think being good-hearted is what cost him and everybody else. And I don't think that's true. I don't think good-hearted is the problem. I think the problem is the lack of fences, the lack of boundaries. You see, for relationships to flourish, for relationships to thrive, they need good boundaries. They need fences to be drawn. They need ongoing conversation. Otherwise, you descend into unmet expectations. You descend into taking advantage. You descend into dysfunction. You descend into pseudo-false community. And the bingo bug had one conversation, just one, with Thidwick. And after he had that conversation, listen, everything else after that was assumption without conversation. It was assumption without conversation. Oh, I can stay here as long as I want. I can invite anybody else into this. I can take advantage of Thidwick. It doesn't matter. You see, the problem wasn't being good-hearted. The problem was assumption without conversation. And if you want to build resentment, if you want to build undercurrent into your relationships, particularly between adults, grown-ups, even grown-up children and parents, you just keep going and live out of assumptions without conversations. I think that's what was broke. So in our family, I have my 27-year-old eldest son, Josh, and he's married to Christina, been married 5 years. I have my daughter, Julissa, 26 years old, and she's been married to Kevin for 3 years. I have my 21-year-old son, Jake, in college. And we have to have many conversations to avoid operating out of assumptions, to avoid the resentment, the missed expectations, and the crossing over each other's fence lines and violating mutual respect. And that needs a lot of conversation. And by the way, that means we as a family have many conversations, most of them ahead of time, so that we know what the fences are, but many of them in the midst. Because we all want to have healthy relationships. Oh, we all want healthy, grown-up adult relationships, but they're not easy to get. A lot like this little video that just we think is one of the most adorable videos of this little kid trying to eat the cookie. It's only 20 seconds. Check it out.
Remember when Dad threw his flip-flops to go down at the beach standing on the boardwalk?
No.
His blue and black ones. We have pictures of it somewhere.
What happened?
Stuff. Okay, back before people wore flip-flops.
Is this
real?
before or after the stabbing? Which one was this?
Are you giving up, bud?
Is that not just one of the most adorable little moments? Did you hear what the mom said? You giving up, bud? In other words, he kept trying to eat it, but those little armed floaties that were designed to keep him safe in the water were getting in the way of eating the cookie. Now listen, a lot of things get in the way of what we want in a relationship. And many times, well, we just lay it down and say, I quit, I give up. We wanted a good thing, but we won't persevere to get it because it's too difficult. I'm telling you, in our relationship as parents with grown-up kids, we have uncomfortable conversations. And together we draw lines, we build fences, and we say to cross that is to violate mutual respect. And we build all sorts of fences that we do not cross out of respect for one another. I don't know if that's making sense to you, but I think that's what was missing. I think that's what got them stuffed in on the wall. And so as a family, we have many of these. If it's helpful, I'm going to give you some examples. These are kind of fences that we've drawn. I can't give you tons. I'll give you a few. In fact, we spent probably 3 hours as a family dialoguing about what I could talk about and ended up with so much stuff. I'm barely scratching the surface. But I hope it's helpful. Don't know if it is, but I'll give you some examples. Here are some things that kind of reflect some of our family fences. Here's one of them. And they're not right, wrong, good, bad. I'm just going to give them to you. Here's one of them. You are not fully family till you marry, but when you marry, you are fully family. What do I mean? What I mean is, if Josh is dating Christina, while he's dating her, we don't consider her fully family. She's not fully in the family until they get married. And when they get married, she's fully family. She is our daughter. When Julissa is dating Kevin, he's not fully family. Now, your family can do it different. It doesn't matter. Every family has their customs. What's important is that you discuss it and you know ahead of time so you know what to expect, so you don't operate out of assumptions, so you don't misread things. So ahead of time, we would have these conversations. Now, that confused Kevin when he's dating Julissa because we were going off on a family vacation and he wanted to be included because in his family growing up, if you date anybody, their family, they go on family vacation. In our family, as a rule, if you're dating but you're not married, you don't go on the family vacation. He's like, how come I'm not going on? And we had the conversation ahead of time. Otherwise, resentment, misunderstanding, breakdown, discord, contention gets built. So we talked it through. This is one of the rules. Now, once they get married, he's my son. Let me give you another one. Kind of a fence we draw. We will offer advice only when asked. Listen, that's hard to do. I have had to learn to shut my mouth. Now, I have great advice to give, but if they don't ask, I don't give it. In fact, Marcia and I spend the majority of our time praying for our grown-up kids rather than talking to them. We don't parent them, we pray for them. If they ask for advice, we give it. And by the way, we will not become their marriage counselor. We'll offer advice, but if it hits a line, we're like, you know what? We're not going to be your marriage counselor. We're going to help you find a marriage counselor, and we've encouraged them to do so. Here's another one, number 4. We talk about expectations ahead of time. And I mean this, seriously. We talk about expectations ahead of time. And when things break down or when we didn't know the expectations on either side, when someone crosses somebody else's line, we literally, you start talking about somebody else in the family, you have to go handle the conflict face to face. No pretense. Write it down. No pretense. I hate pretense. I grew up in it. Pretense destroys authentic relationships. It kills them. And there's no manipulating with anger. You don't manipulate, you don't mismanage somebody with anger. You don't amp up to get your way. In fact, we practice Proverbs 15. Look on the screen. Here it is. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. practice that. When somebody kind of offends you, somebody crosses your line and you want to come with anger and amperage, a soft answer turns away anger. Let's have a conversation. Apologize if you need, forgive if you need, restore, and redraw the fence line. We see, we're all unique, but can I tell you something? If you're going to have a grown-up relationship with your grown-up kids, then you have to respect their choices, respect their differences, not squeeze each other into one another's mold, but try and squeeze into the mold of God's wisdom. Because we want to be picked to be their friends. And if they'll let us, we want to offer advice. I love being a parent of grown-up kids. It's a great phase. It's a great season. But I respect them as grown-up adults themselves. So as I turn the service over to the campus pastors, what's needed for your growing up family? What can you learn from Solomon and Seuss? While you seek to be good-hearted, what easy seat do you need to avoid? It's a fallacy. And what fences do you need to talk about as a family and honor?